We're going to wrap up this series we've been going through today. It's called The Lost Harvest. It's not a Father's Day message per se. It's not typically the way I roll. But in some ways, it kind of is. That's what we try to do as fathers is plant seeds for our kids' lives so that they will grow and become, hopefully, better men than we were, or better women than however you want to think of it. The point is, we want our kids to be better than we are. And that is something that requires. But we have to keep pouring into our kids. And we don't really get time off. I mean, it's bedtime every night. It's wake them up, fix them some breakfast, or read them a bedtime story, or give them a bath, or chase them down, or wrestle with them, or something like that. And days you come home from work, and maybe you're extra tired, and you're exhausted, and you see that look in their eyes, like, I'm glad you're home, Dad, and we go play, and it's like, I really don't want to. And it's part of the job description. The dad's like, for a little while. And we get up and go, good. And we don't have the energy level that we would like to have. We know we should. So we get up. And honestly, the biggest need in the game of parenthood, not just fatherhood, but parenthood, is just be faithful. Be there. Just show up and do the next right thing. So since this series is all about the idea of what we plant in our lives and what we therefore reap from it, it does reflect on fatherhood. And the laws of the harvest are, I think, especially powerful in light of parenthood, fatherhood in this case. I want to go ahead and kind of lay down the concept. It's not my original idea. It's actually from a book that's now out of print called Life's Choices by John Lawrence. It's a good book. It's interesting. He talks about what was when he wrote the book, what was current times and everything. So he's got a little bit to say about the Vietnam War. So that tells you when it was written, just after Vietnam ended. But the thing I love about it is it's so wrapped up in verses from the Bible. And if I involved half of the verses that he brings into it, we would probably be here a half hour longer than normal. So I've done some paring down and trying to keep things brief, which I don't know if you appreciate, but I appreciate.
We'll always appreciate your brief.
Thank you. Thank you. So I want to go ahead and get 7 laws. We've gone through 6 so far. We're going to go through number 7 today. And I'll save this one last because I believe it's the most powerful. But it's one that slides, I think, under the radar. But first, let's start with number 1. It says we reap the same in kind as we sow. And what this means is that basically, if we sow good things into our lives, later on down the road, we reap good things. If we sow negative things, we reap negative. So, if you're a habitual liar, guess what? Down the road, no one's going to trust you. It's not rocket science. And so, things like that show up. And they just do. And you sow the good things in life, you get something good bigger on the road. Which kind of brings me to the second law, is that we reap in a different season than we sow. So the basic idea being that, you farmers. Farmers, this is all common sense. Anyone who runs a garden, they're going, oh, yeah, of course. You plant in spring, you harvest in fall. Life is the same sort of way. You plant seeds now, and it comes, and maybe it's, a couple weeks down the road, maybe it's a couple months, maybe it's a couple years, maybe it's a couple decades. That sort of thing happens. I read an article just yesterday basically saying that there's an increasing trend in young people for cutting off their parents. And most that, at least according to the article anyway, said that most of the estrangement between parent and child, it's the child who's cutting things off, not the parent. Although obviously it does happen both ways. And it's because we're hearing so much about, hey, if you got someone toxic in your life, you need to cut them out. And so, not saying there are toxic parents that don't need to be cut out, don't get me wrong, but some people who have, poured into their kids and raised them and fed them and been faithful and we're not perfect because none of us are. Some of us are a little less perfect than others, to be honest. But the point is that, just often the kid would just cut off contact. No more phone calls, no more texts, nothing like that, no more contact. And they're just left in the dark for a while. And then you find out later on, hey, when you were 6, you said this, and it really hurt. Or you did that when I was 8. Or, all these things that could be years down the road. Comes back and fixes. And sometimes that's good stuff. I don't think it's get the idea that it's just negative stuff. Because it's the same loss true for the good stuff. I've been, let me give you an example. So my dad currently he's in the hospital. He had a fall a couple of weeks ago. And so he's in there and he's doing well. But he's in there basically for physical therapy. Inpatient rehab, basically, is the idea. And my dad is, in my mind, he is the picture of the quiet, faithful life. He wasn't bombastic, he wasn't, larger than life, anything like that. But he was there all the time. Even after my parents got divorced, my parents never had to, my mom didn't have to sue my dad for child support or anything. They talked it out. We got checked every week when we'd moved away. Back when we still lived in the same town, I'd spend 1 week with mom and then 1 week with dad, and we just switched back and forth. He was just there. Matter of fact, probably some of my best memories I have is just walking by his bed, him kneeling there at bed in his Bible, right? Quiet faith. It's probably 2 words I would probably use to describe my dad. But he poured into me and my siblings. And now, even though my dad was older when he was 44 years old when I was born. And so, my dad is 92 right now. So, he can't take care of himself when he used to. But if he hadn't been a good father, if I built up years and years of bitterness, he had abandoned us or something like that, I wouldn't be planning on going and visiting him in the hospital this afternoon and spending some time. Because I wouldn't want to be around him. That faithfulness is paying off in this over years because I'm my best to take care of it. So I'm hoping, pouring into my kids that someday I'm old, take care of myself. They're willing to step up and change my life. God knows I changed theirs.
But what if they don't?
Oh. And not my kids, not my problem. Yeah, good luck with that. No. So the point is that we reap in a different season of this stuff. I want to go too long here. Law number 3 is we reap more than we sow. Again, farmers are going, of course you do. Plant one seed, you get to plant. You don't get one fruit. When you plant a grape seed, you get a vine that produces numerous bunches of grapes, etc. Things like that. You plant a pecan tree, you get pecans year after year for years.
Like an apple tree?
Yeah, exactly, like an apple tree. And there was one example I thought of when I was going through that. There's a missionary back in early colonial American days, named Johnny Appleseed. Disney even made a cartoon about him. He went across the Pacific Northwest planting seeds and planting trees. So his life is in the Old Testament. And today, We tend to, if we think of apples, we tend to think of the state of Washington. That's in part because we can't. He didn't just plant seed here and there. He, like the cartoon or something else, he planted orchards. Okay? He was busy about it. Same thing for us. When we plant, we get more back. Yeah, than we put out. And that kind of leads me into a lot of the world. We reap in proportion to stuff. The apple seed, he did. When he went planting, he didn't plant a seed and get a tree. Like I said, he planted orchards. It's the same thing. You plant more than one seed, you get a huge harvest. And you only plant, 10, well, you still got more apples than you can eat in your year, but the point is that you get a limited supply. And, all you're trying to do is plant a garden that's going to feed your family, then okay, go plant it. But life, when it comes to good stuff, I want to plant the good stuff as much as I can so that more comes back. That's the idea. So we reap in proportion as we sow. Number 5, we reap the full harvest of good only if we persevere. The evil comes on its own. That's a sad reality of it. Is that good often, if we don't do something to maintain it, think about it, just like the garden, you got to eat that garden, you got to care for it, you got to water it, you got to fertilize it. It takes care, it takes perseverance in this example. And if you fail at that, weeds come and choke it out, or it produces a lesser harvest. It's not to say that you won't still get a harvest if you plant good. But if you persevere, if you're faithful in it day in, day out for years on end, guess what? You get a bountiful harvest. Bad flip side of that is that, like you said, the evil tends to come on itself. You remember, you were here last week, I went ahead and said that I give a personal exception to that, in that I feel like that as Christians especially, but really as anyone, there are certain things we can do to pull out the weeds. Like, pull out the negative stuff that we planted. So like, simple words, I'm sorry, will you please forgive me? Wrong way. A lot of the wrongs that we've done, that stuff that would come back to haunt us later, it really comes back down to if we're really sorry about it. We go to that person, we apologize, we ask, because as Christians, it's not enough for us to just say, I'm sorry. We have to go the next step. We have to say, will you please forgive me? That's part thing. I don't know why it is for me. It is. Saying I'm sorry is hard enough, but going that next step is just that much harder. But anyway, the point is that pulls up a lot of the wrongs that we've done. Doesn't fix everything. There's some people who just, because I've known a lot of people who have lived a good chunk of their life as addicts, drug addicts. And so sometimes the wrongs that they've done to people are so significant to that person that even just showing up is going to cause that person emotional harm. And so in the cases like that, we say, hey, if you're going back and apologizing and maybe even offering to make some sort of restitution if that's appropriate, if that's going to hurt the person, well then don't do it. I mean, you don't want to hurt them again by trying to make it right. But for the rest of the cases, this is the hard part, especially I think as men, without swallow or cry. That sucks. There's no time. I don't care what spice you put on it, eating crow tastes horrible. So it is what it is. But the point is that we do reap that full harvest of good only if we persevere. But the evil does come on its own. We do the things that we can in order to minimize that. All right.
Mr. Ross?
Yeah.
When you talk about the seed thing, it's kind of like one person telling the other person one word that could change the whole time.
Yeah, that's a really good example. Yeah, and so that's why, like when I go into a convenience store or grocery store, I be friendly. Even I have problems with self-checkout, okay? So, A, I don't like that it eliminates someone's job. B, I know I need to talk to people. I'm an introvert. It's not always come easy. So going and talking to the clerk always takes a little bit of extra energy. And so going, just trying to be that friendly face. If something goes wrong, as sometimes happens, maybe it's their fault, maybe it's my fault, maybe it's the machine's fault, I don't care. If something goes wrong, usually people react bad. we're in a hurry, we're short-tempered, and so we take it out on, or to some degree. Some people are really good at that, and others that we just don't do that. But regardless, I want to be that kind of man because it might make a difference in that person's life. It might mean that they're going to go home and they're going to be a little nicer to their kids and their wife or their husband or someone. Or maybe they'll be nice to their. The point is that it passes on out. And I think that somewhere in the grand scheme of things, that comes back down on me. Because if nothing else, I've been friendly with this person consistently, and if I'm going to the grocery store on a consistent basis, they get to know me, and so they might look forward to seeing me, and they are going to be friendly to me, and it might be that my day is the one that's going badly, and they can put me up. Things like that. You're absolutely right. All right. So, law number 6 that we covered last week. We cannot do anything about last year's harvest, but we can about this year. Like I said, with that exception that I make personally, that's not something that's in the book. That's my personal exception. I think there are some things. But for the most part, what's done is done. And you can't do a whole lot about it. We can apologize, we can ask forgiveness, we can offer to make restitution, but we can't change that person's heart. We can't change what has happened. Maybe what it is. And so be it. Again, we can do about this year's harvest. We have choices to make today. And I've known, like, bringing back Father's Day, there's the idea that some fathers are like, I want to get to do what I want to do. And sometimes it doesn't involve their kids. And while I certainly understand that, and this is the day we should be spending with our sons and daughters. So, guys realize that, and I know sometimes finding a break as a parent is hard. Still, the point is that we can sow those seeds even today. And we have choices tomorrow that well. We can only take care of it. So, pass is gone. All right, that brings me up to this one. So this is the one, like I said, I think it's kind of the one that's easily missed. And it's this, that we reap only what has been sown. The first time I heard it, I was like, that's the same thing as law number 1, and reap in kind as we sow. But what I'm talking about is 2 different things. First of all, when reap in kind as we sow, it's like, whatever we sow, we get back the same thing. We don't plant grapes and get back figs. Whatever it is. This is we only reap what has been sown, not necessarily what you have sown. Okay? People have an effect on each other. I generally call this, our choices, our actions have what I call sluggish damage. And so it affects those who are closest to us the most, and then in concentric circles out. And so the bigger our reach is as a person, the more effect it has, our choices have. That's the way of it. Which means that my life has been affected by numerous people's choices. I have a mom, I have a dad, I have a brother, I have a sister. I have cousins, I have uncles, I have aunts, I have a wife, I have kids, I have friends. I've had numerous friends throughout the years. And the choices we make affect each other. And that's just a simple reality of it. And on the negative side of that is that, if our parents were neglectful, if they had abandoned us, something like that, there's a wound there that takes time and intentional effort to really heal. You can ignore it for the most part and get along, but whether you realize it or not, you're walking through your whole life with a limp. And that's parenting. What about our siblings? Has your brother or sister ever done something to you that you can remember years later, and you're like, oh, I wish I could get him back to that. And maybe it was a prank. I don't know. There's plenty of that typically goes on between siblings, but what about something that was serious? I mean, it didn't happen to my family, but I can remember, watching TV shows where one sister, steals the boyfriend of the other sister, something like that. Crap like that happens, let's be honest. And then there's friendships and all the other stuff. And the point is that all this stuff has an effect on our life. And sometimes it's not, most times it's not. Sometimes it's a big, big deal. I mean, it's like, I'm going to therapy because of this kind of a big deal. And that's just the reality of it. Other people plant in our lives, whether they mean to or not, whether they want to or not. There's just, our actions have effect on us. And so, again, people have an effect. I mean, it's just as much that we never sow. It's not us. It's our parents, or it's our siblings, or it's our friends, or it's our spouse. And I got a great wife, but she's not perfect. I promise you. She's wounded me in the past. I'm sure she will yet. I'm going to do the same to her. Point is that this is stuff that we get from other people, and this is what our culture loves to focus on. Is well, our parents, what they've done to us in the past. That's why most of us have gone to therapy in some sense. It's usually what our parents did to us. I can point to people in the room that have had problems with parents and wounds from parents. Like my son Caleb.
Poor Caleb.
It's really hard.
He's a middle child, so he always gets the wrong end.
But in all seriousness,
Yeah.
I was going to share, like, in some circumstances, maybe the way that we're living is so disconnected and selfish. The people that are invested in us get so hurt by watching us hurt ourselves. Like the emotional harm comes onto them. They're like, why do they keep doing that? Why are they doing this and doing that? And so all that they can do is just say, after a few years of watching you do better for yourself, then we can kind of reconnect with you. But right now, what you're doing hurts us so much. We just, and so that I know that's experience I've had with my sibling, just for them to see me do better for myself, feel myself before they're going to reinvest.
Yeah, and I get that, and I've said that before. I mean, just like 2 weeks ago in the men's recovery class, we're talking about boundaries, and I said sometimes you have to cut some people out of your life, but you pay attention and you see if there's been changes, and if they change, well, then maybe you go ahead and extend out. Maybe it's parent, maybe it's friend, I don't care who it is. The point is that maybe there's somebody who hurt you in the past, but they've changed, and maybe it's time for a reestablishing of relations. Maybe it's not. Some people will choose to never change. That's sad, but it is what it is. There's good sides to this as well. Dad is so into my life. Tanya has, whether they realize it or not, my kids have. Mom definitely has. So many people have poured into me, and there's good things that have come out of it. To a large extent, I'm the man I am because of people who have been in my life, because of the faithfulness of my dad, because the sincere love my mom has for God, and my brother and my sister and friends and pastors and mentors and teachers, all that good stuff. It all comes and it's shaped me over the years, made me who I am to a large degree. Not completely. I still always have choices, and I still get to, I guess you can say, shape my destiny. That sounds a little grandiose, but you get the idea. I still have choices to make, and I can choose to follow those examples, or I can ignore and do my own thing, for good or bad. So there's that. But here's the thing I really wanted to get in and go on about this whole thing about that we read only what has been said. Is that people aren't the only ones sowing into the world. We have a loving Father who is God Almighty, who's sowing into our lives the whole time. And that's what I love about it. And I apologize for the Perry. Perry's having an issue with this series because he's like, where's the grace? Where's the grace? I don't like to say we're talking about the grace. We're talking about grace here and now. This is what I've been saying. Because what we read sometimes is what God is sowing into our life. And make no mistake, you read through the Bible, all of us are sinners. All of us have rebelled against God in some degree or another. And the sad thing is that we hurt him deeply when we do that. on an individual basis, and then, as humanity, we've done it all. And so on every level, we've hurt God time and time and time and time again. I've done it, and I'm trying to be a faithful follower. And there's probably not many days in my life where I haven't screwed up many times. But God is faithful, and He pours into us anyway. And we see this in the Bible. Now I want to go ahead and break out. Look at the passage. It's a passage in my favorite book, John. John chapter 4.
Are you putting it on the screen?
No, it's not.
Okay.
You open up your Bible or flip your screen on your phone, either way. So John chapter 4. It is verses 37 and 38. Says, you know the saying, one plants and another harvests. And it's true. I sent you to harvest where you didn't plant. Others had already done the work, and now you will get to gather the harvest. Now, to give you an idea of the context, Jesus is talking about a time that He sent His disciples out in pairs, and they're going out and they're witnessing to people about who Jesus is, the miracles He's done, and they're casting out demons, and they're doing all kinds of awesome stuff. And He's basically saying, you guys went out, and the results that you guys got to see, you didn't work to get that. Other people's planted seeds. Other people did the gardening and the weeding and the irrigation and all that stuff. And you got to come in and you got to reach the harvest. And this is true oftentimes because statistically speaking, for the average Christian to become a believer, it takes 7 different people telling them what the good news about Jesus is for them to come to Christ. 7 people.
Do you say that again?
Statistically speaking, the average Christian has 7 people introduce them to the gospel before they come to Christ. So if you share the news that Jesus was invited and they didn't respond, you're in good company. That's all of us. Anyone who's ever bothered to do it, really. Even Jesus Himself. So many people He poured into didn't come to the later. Guy who wrote the bulk of the New Testament, a guy we call Paul, he used to be known by the name Saul. He was a zealot for the Jewish faith, and he was responsible for the death and arrest of many Christians before they came to faith. But he was there after the death of a man named Stephen. And Stephen, at the very least, had the opportunity to share the gospel. He'd heard it by the time he met Jesus on the road to Damascus. He heard it before. And Jesus is the one that gave this example through miraculous means. Talked to Paul and got to reap that harvest. But Stephen was faithful. Paul and the rest of the crowd goes up. But anyway, that's the point, is that the things that others have planted, we reap, and God has planted so much into our lives, and we get to reap that. And that is what we call grace. Love it. God gives generously and graciously. Now, I want you guys to really walk away with that, because a lot of what we harvest, we have it. So the Bible is very clear that it says the wages of sin is death. Time and time again, we have earned spiritual death, sometimes even physical death. And God, in His grace, has said, no, I'm not going to let this fall on me. Or good things. So if you're ever wondering, biblically speaking, what the difference between grace and mercy is that mercy is things that we've done that we deserve to get the repercussions from. God says, no, you're not getting that. That's right. When we do not get, we have earned, in the negative sense. That is God's mercy. Okay? But God doesn't stop. He doesn't just say, okay, I'm going to let you into heaven because I'm merciful. He doesn't stop just there. He stops and He says, okay, I'm going to reach out to you, and I don't want to just pick you up and dust you off when you fell down. I'll pick you up, I want to dust you off. I want to buy you some new clothes. I want to clothe you in my righteousness, so that when I look at you, I see my perfect son and daughter. He adopts us into his home. And it's not like, I've heard stories about some kids who have been adopted and they were kind of treated less than. It's not like that. God takes us in, on day one, he writes us into the world. We get an equal portion of Jesus Christ himself, the one who really was perfect, the good son, The rest of us are like sheep who went our own way. God says, no, they're all my family. All these people who put their faith and trust in me. They're my kids. They're my family. This is grace. This is how he pours himself out. Because that's the gospel. John 3:16. Stop and think about it. It screams to fit into this. John 3:16. Reading out this version of it instead of going off memory. It says, for God loved the world so much that he gave his one and only son, so that everyone who believes in him will not perish, but have eternal life. God sent his son into the world not to judge the world, but to save the world through him. And there's no judgment against anyone who believes in him. But anyone who does not believe in him has already been judged for not believing in God's one and only son. It goes on. God gave it. That might be the very core of that verse that is probably the most famous in all of Christianity. For God so loved the world that he gave his only son. God gave it. But he didn't give the same thing. He sowed his most precious thing into our lives, his own son, Jesus Christ. Gave his life for us. That's the beauty of the gospel. That's the beauty of grace. And we get to reap the harvest of that. Not only do we get eternity in heaven with him as believers, join the heirs. God doesn't just say, okay, I'll let you in. He says, come in, come sit at the table. We're going to sit down to a family dinner together. This is what it is. This is what it's supposed to be like. We get the best that paradise has to offer. The infinite imagination of God, who made Grand Canyon, who made the Andes Mountains, and made Mount Kilimanjaro and Mount Everest, who made the Marianas Trench, who made beautiful oceans in the Pacific, all this stuff, all this beauty and grandeur that he's made, he's going to be pouring that creative juice to us forever. And make no mistake, God doesn't run out of ideas. That's grace. That's the harvest. God himself. It's the stuff he's poured into my life and into your lives. That is the ultimate law of the harvest. Because all the negative stuff we've done, let's just say every single negative thing we've done in our life comes back with vengeance some point in our life, and it's just misery and punishment and all that stuff. If you stop and think about it in terms of eternity, what's 80 or 100 years of pain compared to 100 billion thousand millennia of paradise? You know that song Amazing Grace, that what's usually the last verse, when we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise. Blows my mind. There's no end. There's no end to God's grace. It keeps flowing day in. Made a difference in my life today. I can't wait to see what heaven's going to be like. And we get to experience unfiltered, raw love God has. You like nothing we experience. We catch glimpses of it now and again. We do. And it's great. It's awesome. It gets me through, It's so much.
You think we're gonna go like little kids again? you know, an experience.
In some ways, yeah. I know people who think that heaven is going to be like we wake up from having died or Christ having died, we wake up and just kind of know everything. And that'd be right. I don't know. But personally, what I would like to think is that it's going to be just like the experience of life. Hopefully, I know we're eating more today than I did yesterday. Hopefully, tomorrow I'm going to know more. So I get to explore the depths of God, His majesty, His wonder, His glory, His justice, all these beautiful things about Him. And I get to experiencing that and come to know so that, 10,000 years from now, I'm going to look back on whatever height of wisdom my life attains here on earth. I'm going to go shake my head. I'm going to oh man, I wish I could go back and tell myself. I didn't know what I thought I did. It's daft though. It kind of reminded me back of that last song. This is God making beautiful things just lives. This is what He does. He gives it freely. The thing we got to do is we got to accept. We got to take it. It requires basically two things. It requires us actually believing that God is who He says He is, and that He did what He said He did. You got to believe that. If you don't think it's true, then it doesn't make a difference in our life. And then we got to say, okay, done it my way. Now, here on out, your way. I'm living life your way. It takes us humbling ourselves and just apologizing for the times that we did something wrong about God, to God. We hurt Him. The Bible calls that repentance. You got to change. But any of the changes He's made in my life, I don't miss the old days. Everything's better.